Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rob Minturn, physical therapist. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the feet, foot care for the mountains, and diving into kind of what the foot is. We're going to dive into what the foot is, the structures of the foot a little bit, so that way you understand what I'm talking about. And then we're going to go into how to keep them healthy during your training and getting ready for the mountains. Before we do that, I want to talk about the Spicy Saturday workout like usual. We are looking at for time, you're looking at a 30-20-10. So the first movement is going to be a 30-calorie ski ergometer, bike, or a row. You get to choose either one. And then you're going to do dual dumbbell squats. And then you're going to do a 50-foot front rack dumbbell carry after each round. All right? So how this is going to work, you'll do the 30 calories on this whatever cardio machine that you're going to do. Once you hit that 30 calories, then you're going to go into the squats, all right? And then you're going to do 30 of those squats, okay, with the dual dumbbell squats. Once you're done with that, then you'll do the rack carry at 50 feet. The weight that you're going to use for the RX is going to be 35 for the guys, 20 for the ladies. Once you're done with that 30 round, then you're going to go into 20. So you'll burn 20 calories on whatever aerobic activity you're going to do. And then you're going to run into the dumbbell squats, the dual dumbbell squats for 20 reps. And then you got the 50-foot rack carry. And then you'll do that again for the 10 calories, 10 dumbbell squats, and then the 50-foot rack carry. You're going to time yourself out, all right? As far as the scaled movements go, so instead of doing, if you don't have access to a ski ergometer, a bike, or a rowing machine, you can always do a 3-minute run, a 2-minute run, and then a 1-minute run, followed by 30 squats, 20 squats, 10 squats, all right? So the same rules apply for the squats and the rack carry, the 50-foot rack carry, but you're just going to substitute your cardio in for the running instead. All right, let's see. And then for the scaled movements, you can do, or for the guys, you're going to do a 25-pound dumbbell. You're going to use 25-pound dumbbells, and then for the ladies, you're going to use 15-pound dumbbells. Again, you can mix and match the RX with the scaled movements. It's not a big deal. Okay, let's dive into the foot. So, talking about the foot, you've got three parts of the foot. You've got the forefoot, you've got the midfoot, and you've got the rear foot. So the forefoot is going to be, if you look at your palm, the forefoot is going to be the part of the palm of your hand. It's going to be the bony structures of the palm of your hand. That's going to be the section of your forefoot. Your toes are your fingers, and then before that, you've got basically the palm of your hand. That's important because that's going to have a little rotational component to it when you're walking, when you're running. You need to have motion there. Sometimes we do get a little stiff there, especially with the endurance athletes and with hikers, and you can get a little stiff there, and sometimes that needs a little mobilization. Then you've got the midfoot, and that's basically the bones that make up the front portion of the ankle, and then you've got the rear foot, that's going to be your heel. All right, so all of those joints, there's not a whole lot of motion there, but sometimes those joints do get a little stiff, and sometimes they need a little mobilization, stuff that you can do yourself at home, or if you need to go in to see a physical therapist, they can certainly help you out with that too. And then we're going to move up to the ankle. So the ankle bone is connected to the knee bone, and I think that's a song, but the ankle bone truly is connected to the knee bone. The tibia and the fibula make up the ankle. So the tibia is your shin. That makes up the medial ankle, the ankle bone on the inside of your body, and then the ankle on the outside, that's made up of the fibula. Both of those run all the way up to connect to the knee bone, or to the knee joint. And then your femur connects to the knee joint. So you're going to see in a little bit that all of these are one giant chain. And that's going to be crucial as far as if you're dealing with plantar fasciitis or an ankle sprain. You need to look further up the chain as far as your strength and conditioning in your rehab program. If you're not looking further up the chain, you might be missing the boat and creating a little more stability at the ankle joint. All right. As far as the muscles go, so there's a shitload of muscles that make up the foot itself. Muscles that start in the foot and end in the foot, but there are also a lot of muscles that start in the lower leg and insert onto the foot. I'm not going to name them all. It would be pointless to name them all, but just know that there are muscles that cross both the knee joint and the ankle joint. So again, if you're someone that had a knee replacement or you had knee surgery and you're struggling to get your knee straight, sometimes that is due to the fact that some of the muscles within the lower leg have a little bit of tension in there and they're not letting your knee go straight. That's why it's important too to look at joints above and below. Like if someone is coming for an ankle injury, I'm looking at the forefoot, I'm looking at the knee, I'm looking all the way up at the hip to make sure that everything is moving well and is strong, so that way we can rule out any other issues going on at joints above and below the area that seems to be symptomatic. But all right, keeping them healthy. So first off, you got to let your feet breathe. Toe spacers is something that it's a passive modality. It's not something that you're going to be doing to get stronger, but it is a passive modality, something that you could be doing if you're struggling with bunions, or if you've got some toes that cross over one another. You could get a toe spacer. They make expensive ones, like up to $40. You can also get a $10 one off Amazon. They all do the same thing, but those are good to wear while you're hanging out around the house, on the weekends, after work, before work, while you go to bed. You can wear some toe spacers to help spread those feet back out, or spread the toes back out, to get those feet, or to get the toes to start to splay again. As far as shoe choices go, so that's one of the issues. Like, people talk about their bunions being hereditary, like their mom had bunions, their grandma had bunions, so they're going to have bunions. Bunions is not necessarily hereditary. Your grandma and your mom probably had bunions because of the type of shoes that they wore when they were growing up, so that started to form their foot and started to point their toes inward towards each other. Shoes have gotten a little bit better, and especially women not having to wear heels as often. It seems like it's getting more acceptable for women to wear tennis shoes in the workplace, and not necessarily like the business casual outfit, giddy up, not being in heels. So those shoes are going to have a wider toe box, so that's going to allow their feet to spread out a little bit more. That's why you saw bunions more often in women than you did in men. But as far as the shoe choice goes, you're going to want to have a wider toe box shoe. So shoes like Flux Footwear, Vivo Barefoot. There's another one that I can't remember off the top of my head. Those are going to be shoes that are minimalist type shoes, so they're going to be a zero heel drop shoe, and they're going to have a wide toe box, so you're not going to have that slight elevation at the heel. So sometimes that can create issues with someone with Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis. With that slight heel elevation, if they do that for years and years and years, that tissue can become shortened because it's used to being in a shortened position. So if they do get to a zero drop shoe, or if their boot doesn't have any sort of drop from the heel to the toe, that can cause issues, because now that tendon and that plantar fascia, or sheath, I'll answer that in a question or in a second, Levi. The heel drop, if there's no heel drop and they're not used to that tissue is going to be stretched out, and when you're stretching that tissue out on top of loading it with hiking day after day, mile after mile, that's where issues can come into play. So make sure that, I'm not saying that you have to go to a zero drop shoe, I'm not saying that you have to go to a wide toe box shoe, but if you are having issues, those would be some shoe choices you want to check out. The Flux Footwear, Flux, or the Vivo Barefoot. Those would be two shoe brands to check out. Asics, Brooks, Hoka's. I have Speedlands for my trail running shoe. The first thing that people do, and I made a post about this a couple weeks ago, or maybe I think it was last week. The first thing that people do as far as runners go, if they're having foot issues or knee issues or hip issues, they're automatically changing their shoes. Even back issues, they're automatically changing their shoes. They're like, shit, this shoe isn't working, I'm going to change my shoe, and that's going to make my pain better. While it may make your symptoms better, it may alleviate them in the short term, in the long term, it really doesn't change anything as far as tissue tolerance goes. What changing your shoe does is it changes typically the striking pattern and the load displacement. So physiologically, you're not changing the tissue's resiliency, you're not changing the tissue's ability to handle load. All you're doing is simply transferring that load, say from more of a heel strike to more of a forefoot strike, or more of a midfoot strike. So you're just shifting that force to a different part of the foot. Eventually it's going to become symptomatic. Eventually you're going to change your shoe again because you don't continue to address the underlying issues of the load tolerance. Maybe your progressions suck as far as your exercise progression with your running. But also you're probably not addressing what you need to address in terms of resistance training as well. Speaking of resistance training, working out barefoot, as long as the gym is okay with it, working out barefoot is a solid option. When you wear shoes in the gym, the shoe is providing support to the foot, so it's not creating as much demand on the intrinsic muscles of the foot. The intrinsic muscles are the muscles that start within the foot, kind of like the palm of your hand. I talked about the forefoot. The muscles that start there and there, those all add stability to the foot. So when you're resistance training without shoes on, that's going to place a greater demand on those muscles, and it's going to create a more stable foot. So foot arches. Levi, I'm going to answer your question right now. So foot arches. I don't give a damn if you have a high arch or a low arch, if you have flat feet, if you have whatever you want to call it about your feet. It really doesn't matter in terms of symptoms, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but this is my opinion. Before you had symptoms, you had the same type of arch. You had the same high arch, you had the same low arch, you had the same flat foot. It really, your foot arch didn't change because you now have symptoms. You were dealing with that type of foot pattern or that foot structure, bony structure, for all your life. What changed was, again, the load tolerance. You did something different. You did more hiking, you did more running, you did more lifting, you did more cycling, you did more whatever. You did more of something, you did more standing at work than what you're used to. And so what that does is it loads those tissues more than what they're used to. So then you created an inflammatory response that's more than what the body was used to, more than what the demands were before. So now you're going to have an excessive inflammatory response, and that's where you're going to have symptoms. So I'm not, if someone's coming in for plantar fascia, yes, I'm going to mobilize the ankle a little bit. I'm going to mobilize the forefoot, the midfoot, the rear foot. But I'm also going to be looking at a lot of the low capacity of the calf, of the gastroc and the soleus, the two big muscles of the calf. I'm looking at hamstring strength. I'm looking at glute strength, because if you're not looking further up the chain, there are things that happen at the hip. Like if you see a woman or a man walking around knock-kneed, their foot is going to, what's called overpronate, so their arch is going to collapse a little bit more. And they're likely knock-kneed because of the fact that their hips are weak, right? Or you see someone walking around duck-footed, their feet are pointed out to the side. They're going to, their foot arches typically are a little more collapsed in that position too. You're going to be hitting your head against the wall and getting nowhere if you're only addressing foot stuff, and if you're only stretching the foot, you're only stretching the calves. You need to look further up the chain and strengthen the glutes and strengthen the hamstrings to give assistance to the foot to offload the pressure on the foot, because the structures at the foot are not able to handle the demand that you're placing on it, whether it's running, hiking, or it's just the demands of your work and everyday life. You need to address things further up the chain. As far as orthotics go, so orthotics are going to be the same thing as far as the load displacement. So you need, if orthotics work for you, that's great. Again, it's not addressing the underlying, it's not changing the tissue's ability to handle the load that you're placing on it. It is simply changing the displacement of that load. So eventually the orthotic's not going to work, and you don't need to go in and get another custom orthotic. What you need to do is get the foot stronger, get your calf stronger, get your hamstrings and your glutes stronger, so that way the tissue is able to handle that load and not be symptomatic. As far as custom orthotics go, there's not any research out there showing that custom orthotics are superior to over-the-counter orthotics. I've never bought a pair of sheep feet. I have never had custom orthotics done. I know folks that have. I've had clients that have had sheep feet, and they absolutely love them. If you're doing it for the comfort, because they're softer, they're more padded, that's totally fine if you want to spend that kind of money. If you're doing it for the arch support, try over-the-counter orthotics first. Save the money, try over-the-counter orthotics first. Take that money that you would have spent on sheep feet and get your happy ass a gym membership, and then see what that does as far as increasing the load tolerance of the foot and seeing if that completely takes away your symptoms. The last thing that I want to talk about is getting a pedicure. And I know most of my clientele are dudes. I don't know the percentage of men to women in the hunting population, but I know it's far favoring men. So hopefully you guys get a little chuckle out of this, get a good laugh out of this. But pedicures, talking about nail care and calluses. So calluses it's a buildup of skin, it's a toughening of the skin due to friction in the area. Calluses are good to have. Calluses, you get calluses on your hand throwing hay, you get calluses on your hand doing manual labor. They're good to have to a point, right? It builds tougher skin, but you can rip them off. Same thing on your feet. If your feet develop calluses with hiking, with running, with repetitive motion, if your work requires you to be on your feet quite a bit and you're developing calluses on your feet, that's good. That's your skin adapting to handle the stress and handle the load that you're applying to it by adapting the skin. What can happen sometimes, and maybe it's already happened to you, is that callus can rip off, right? So if you have a big hunt and you're not necessarily a weekend warrior, you're someone that takes off time to go hunting, maybe a week, maybe it's 5 days, maybe it's 10 days, maybe it's a 14-day sheep hunt. Getting a pedicure done about 2 weeks before that hunt to grind down some of those calluses is not a bad idea. Again, calluses are good, but if you let them go too long, sometimes if you catch them just right, you can rip that, and that's going to create one heck of a situation if you're 15 miles deep on a sheep hunt or any kind of hunt, and you have to come out, or you have to modify how much you can move because of the fact that you just ripped off a callus. Same thing with nail care. If you're someone that struggles with ingrown toenails, getting a pedicure done can be a way to help curb that as well. Typically, if you're going to go in and get a pedicure, they're going to grind down your calluses. They're going to do some nail clipping and all that anyway. But that is something that, again, it can help improve with ingrown toenails. It's not something you want to do right away. I recommend probably about 2 weeks, depending on how fast your nails grow. But for me, it's if I'm going to do any sort of nail care, I'm going to do it about 2 weeks before my hunt. I've noticed that if I wait till about a week before my hunt, I do struggle with a bit of inflammation on the sides of my toes and on the ends of my toes, just because the nail hasn't had time to grow back yet. And it's something to do maybe with your significant other, so that way, until I wear a broken peg. Do it, man. Absolutely, yeah. Bring your wives. It's something that you could spend some time with your wife. If it's something that you've never normally done, it could be a cool little surprise date before you go out on a hunt. So that way you're kind of surprising them with something that you normally don't do. That would be a cool little surprise for them, I think. So, all right, I don't think any recommendations for dealing with blisters across the entire midfoot. Is that on the bottom of your foot? I'm guessing that's on the bottom. You're not dealing with it on the top, like where the tongue of the boot is. I'll give him a second to respond. Does anybody else have questions? Across the bottom. Is that around your arch? Is that what you're describing as your midfoot? Sorry for all these questions. It's taking you a second to respond. But if you're describing your midfoot as your arch, might not be a bad idea. Something's going on with this, your insert or the sole of your foot. There's some friction going on there. Sock choice. I'm not a guy for liners. I've never struggled with blisters like that. Usually where I struggle with blisters is on the outside of my big toe or the outside knuckle portion of the big toe. I would check out, if you haven't tried liners yet, definitely check out liners, but also a sock choice. Darn Tough is by far the best sock that I've had. I've tried multiple different socks. I've even tried alpaca socks, heel to. Yeah, you've got some sort of the boot, and then the boot fit as well. It might be too big. If your foot's sliding around like that, it sounds like what's going on is your foot is sliding around quite a bit, and that's where you're getting blisters all up and down that. So you look at your shoe or look at your liner. Wear liners if you haven't worn liners before. But look at the sock choice as well. Darn Tough is definitely the better sock choice that I've had. And then you could also look at the size of your boot. You might want to go with a different size boot to prevent any sort of friction back and forth. Now we're getting people hopping on here. Yeah, Darn Tough are good socks. Does anybody else have questions? Landon, Kyle, anybody? We're talking about feet here if you guys want to chime in. I'm just getting ready to hop off. Kurt. Maybe I gotta make these things last a little bit longer. Everybody's hopping on now. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. If you guys do have questions, feel free to shoot me a message or comment on this video too. Otherwise, you guys have a great evening. See you guys.